Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today, the day that this video is getting uploaded, it is the 5-year anniversary of my Booktube channel. So to celebrate this milestone, I decided to do a video where I talk about, very briefly, all of the books that I rated 5 stars over the last 5 years since I started my channel in February of 2020. I haven't ranked them. I am going to go through them in the order in which I read them, unless they are parts of series, and then I'll talk about them all at the same time. There are 104 books on this list. For some of the books, I might have less to say than other books because they're classics that everyone already knows, or because they're books that are easily spoiled, or they are a part of a series, or I simply might not remember a lot about the book if it's been a long time since I've read it. So with all that said, let's get into these 104 books. Book number 1 is The Book of Night Women by Marlon James. This is set on a Jamaican plantation in the late 1700s. We follow Lilith, a young teenage girl who was born into slavery, and she is kind of unwillingly brought into this group called the Night Women, who meet at night and are planning a slave revolt. Book number 2 is Ariel by Sylvia Plath. This is a book of poetry. It is very moving, very sad, and very provoking. Book number 3 is The City of Ember by Jean Duproux. This is a middle grade book where the residents of Ember have been told that their city is the only light in an otherwise dark world. Their generators are starting to fail, and so everyone's a bit worried, and we follow 2 kids who are both trying to solve this problem, but in different ways. Book number 4 is Beyond the Bright Sea by Lauren Woke. This is a middle grade historical fiction. We follow a young girl who has washed up on a skiff, like washed up on an island as a baby, and she's taken in by this local hermit or outcast. This book is set off these kind of remote islands off the coast of New England, and it has a very strong setting and it's very heartwarming, and it's about found family. Number 5 is Heavy by Kiesi Layman. This is a memoir about really his entire life, looking at how being a large Black man really affected all areas of his life, like how those identities intersect and affected him. And it's also about his very complicated relationship with his mother. Number 6 is No Matter the Wreckage by Sarah Kay. This is a book of poetry that I don't really remember super distinctly. I think it felt very like spoken word, and I just remember after every single poem feeling like, yes, I get this. Very accessible, and I think like would speak to a wide range of people. Number 7 is Hunger, A Memoir of My Body by Roxane Gay. In this book, she talks about the trauma that caused a lifelong obsession with her body and with eating. It's a very difficult read. Number 8 is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is charming, funny, warm, basically perfect. Number 9 is Medicine Walk by Richard Wagamese. In this book, we follow a teenage boy, Ojibwe boy, who has been estranged from his father, but is reconnecting as his father is dying, and he takes him on this mountain trek to try to fulfill his wish to be like buried in the traditional way. Number 10 is The Three-Body Problem by Liu Cixin. This is a science fiction book that is very much about the premise and doesn't focus so much on like character development, but it has this really interesting, like, mysterious element to it. Scientists have discovered that science doesn't work. And then this nanotech engineer finds this like virtual game called Three Body Problem, and everything's kind of linked, and I won't say more than that. It's just a very intriguing book. Number 11 is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. It's a beautiful nature book weaving together scientific knowledge with indigenous ways of knowing, and it is a book that demands to be read slowly. Number 12 is The 100 Nights of Hero by Isabel Greenberg. This is a graphic novel retelling of 101 Arabian Nights, but through a feminist lens. Number 13 is Alone by Chaboute. This is a graphic novel that it's not quite a silent novel. There are a few sparse words, but it is essentially 99% illustrations. It's about a person who lives on this remote island in a lighthouse by themselves. Number 14 is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I just loved the sisterly love in this book. Number 15 is, coincidentally, 15 Dogs by Andre Alexis. In this book, there are two Greek gods who are walking by this animal shelter, and they imbue the 15 dogs inside with human intelligence and sentience in order to settle a bet. And it is one of the weirder books I've read, but was surprisingly moving. Number 16 is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This was a reread. This is a horror short story about this woman who is seeing something moving behind the pattern of the yellow wallpaper in her room. And this is based off of the author's own experience with postpartum confinement. Number 17 is Exhalation by Ted Chiang. This is a short story collection of speculative fiction, and Ted Chiang is, in my opinion, the master of speculative short fiction. Number 18 is Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese. This follows a young Indigenous boy who's removed from his family and sent to live at residential school, and it's about the hardship there and also about his career playing hockey, which he learned to play at residential school, and it will tear your heart out through your chest. Number 19 is Don't Call Us Dead by Denez Smith. This is a very punchy, very intense collection of poetry, a lot of them revolving around being Black and being HIV positive. Number 20 is Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. This is basically a workbook to work through your own unconscious racial biases, identifying them, but also like creating plans of action to actually confront and address them. Number 21 is A Fortune for Your Disaster by Hanif Abdurraqib. This is a poetry collection that I don't really remember much about. I just remember absolutely loving it. Number 22 is The Bells by Danielle Clayton. This is a YA dystopian set in a world where these girls called Bells have a sort of supernatural ability to change people's appearances, transform them physically. So it's all about like beauty as commodity and like beauty standards. And it's the first in a series, which I haven't continued, but I plan to. Numbers 23 and 24 are The Hunger Games and Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. I also enjoyed Mockingjay, but the first two were definitely the stronger in my opinion. Number 25 is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This is a Victorian sensation novel. It starts with this encounter late at night with this mysterious woman in white. And it's very over the top. It reminds me almost like of a soap opera, but I just could not pull myself away from this book. It is absolutely gripping and a lot of fun. So number 26, 27, 28, and 29 are all from one series, and that's The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. So volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4. I gave 5 stars to all of those. This is a manga series. This Contagion has turned people into like these monsters or creatures, and all of those like creatures live on the outside, kind of quarantined away from everybody else, except for one little girl who is living on the outside with one of these creatures, and he is trying to protect her, but he cannot touch her, otherwise she'll get the contagion. Number 30 is Good Talk, a Memoir and Conversations by Mira Jacob. This is a graphic memoir that focuses on conversations she has had with friends, family, and even strangers, mostly revolving around her marginalized identity as a South Asian woman, and talks about like the microaggressions that she faces. Number 31 is Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward. This is a memoir where she recounts, I think it's 4 or 5, I think it's 5 different men in her life that all died young in their 20s. Most, if not all of their deaths can be tied to living as Black men in America. So it talks about like how their Blackness contributed to their deaths. And it's quite poetic and beautiful, but also obviously very intensely sad. Number 32, 33, and 34 are all part of the Saga series. So volume 3, 5, and 6 I gave 5 stars to. This is by Brian K. Vaughan and illustrated by Fiona Staples. This is a comic book series about this intergalactic war and 2 people on opposite sides of the war, the oppressor and the oppressed, end up falling in love and having a baby. It's very vulgar and gory, but still very beautifully illustrated and very compelling. I've liked all of the books, but I really started to become attached to characters, and it really started impacting me starting at volume 3. Number 35 is Life on Mars by Tracy K. Smith. This is a poetry collection with lots of astronomical references, and I remember it feeling very like kind of sci-fi, but very grounded in reality at the same time. And this was also a very accessible poetry collection for beginners. Number 36 is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Number 37 is A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. I really loved the characters in this play. Number 38 is New Kid by Jerry Craft. This is a middle grade graphic novel about this kid who's going to a new school, and he's one of very few children of color at the school. Number 39 is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. This book has everything. It's got action and adventure and drama and comedy, and it's a little bit gay. Number 40 is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This is a classic Marmite book. You either love it or loathe it, and I obviously loved it. It's about horrible people falling in love and making life horrible for everyone else around them. Number 41 was The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I always kind of count them as one book, not as 3 separate ones, but they're all separately 5 stars also. This was a reread. This is like my favorite novel, so I read it not infrequently, and I love it every time I read it. Number 42 is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a dystopian novel about these like special kids at this boarding school, but you're not quite sure what's special about them. The only thing you really know about them is that they create like artwork for this gallery, and it's all very eerie and like strangely nostalgic. Number 43 is Severance by Ling Ma. This is a zombie apocalypse novel that really doesn't feel like a zombie apocalypse novel. It's very slow burn. People become infected by, I think it's a fungus, and it slowly turns them into not aggressive zombies, but zombies that are just kind of automatons still going to work. It's very much about kind of like hustle culture and like burnout culture, and it's very, very haunting. Number 44 is The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down by Anne Fadiman. This is my number 1 nonfiction that I've ever read. It's about Hmong refugees whose daughter has really severe epilepsy, and it's about the butting of heads between the Hmong family, the parents, and the doctors in America who are doing their best to try to treat this daughter's epilepsy. And you also have the Hmong parents who love their daughter intensely and want to practice their traditional cures as well. And this was a very like paradigm shifting book for me. Number 45 is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. He remains beautiful while his portrait ages and decays, and it is brilliant and not what I expected. Number 46 is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is about a young woman who marries this man. She goes to live with him at his estate and is figuratively haunted by his deceased wife, Rebecca. It's a very eerie, very foreboding book. Number 47 and number 48 are both parts of a series, the Mada-Adam trilogy. Number 47 is Oryx and Crake, and number 48 is The Year of the Flood by Margaret Atwood. I haven't finished. I am currently reading the third one, so I don't know whether it's going to be 5 stars yet or not, but the first two definitely were for me. These are dystopian, apocalyptic novels. In the first book, we start with a snowman who may or may not be the last person alive on Earth. We don't know for sure. It cuts between his current thoughts in this like post-apocalypse, and it also cuts back to his remembrances of life leading up to that event. In The Year of the Flood, we follow a different group of people pre-apocalypse. So you get more of a sense of this world, what it was like before this collapse. And this one deals a lot with this religious like cult or commune. So it has a lot of like religious overtones. They're both very good, but very graphic and vulgar. So just be aware if that's not your cup of tea. Number 49 is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is her memoir. She is the victim of the Stanford rape case, where Brock Turner, her rapist, basically got a slap on the wrist. It walks through the events, and it also deals a lot with her life like post this incident, and focuses a lot on the actual trial and like the justice system and how it really is not built with victims in mind. And it talks about like the re-traumatization of going through a court case. There is also a lot of hope in this book, and it shows kind of where she's at now and the trajectory her life is on. Number 50 is When Stars Are Scattered by Victoria Jameson and Omar Mohammed. This is a graphic memoir for, I would say, middle grade. It is based on Omar's life. He and his younger brother were refugees living in this like refugee camp. I believe they were from Somalia, maybe. They're at this camp, and Omar is trying to take care of his brother who has developmental delays, and they've been separated from their mother, and he is trying to take care of his brother, go to school. He wants to go to America to go to college. It's one of those like part heartbreaking, part heartwarming books. Number 51 is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. This was a reread. It's a middle grade horror fantasy novel about a girl who goes through a portal to a seemingly perfect world that ends up being a nightmare. Number 52 is Dancing at the Pity Party, a Dead Mom graphic memoir by Tyler Fetter. The author's mother died when the author was in her early 20s. It's a grief memoir with just the right mix of heartfelt moments, sadness, and comedy. It's obvious that she works through a lot of her feelings with humor, and I actually really appreciated that about the book. Number 53 is To Green Angel Tower by Tad Williams. This is the third in a trilogy in the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy. These are fantasy novels. I liked the first two as well, but especially by the time we get to the third one, I just think this brings everything together so well. The books are about this boy named Simon. He's a teenage boy. He is like a scullery boy, and he is forced out of the kingdom and leaves on this adventure, very much like a fish out of water, unlikely hero type situation. And I just became so attached to the characters in this world. Number 54 is Islands of Decolonial Love by Leanne Bedasamosake Simpson. This is sort of hard to pin down. The subtitle is Stories and Songs, so it's kind of like poetry in places, kind of like short stories in places. They're all written through an Indigenous lens, and colonization and decolonization are very much like central to the overall theme of the book. Number 55 is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is set in the 1920s or 30s. It's about two sisters who are separated. One stays and lives with an abuser, and the other one goes to Africa she kind of like reconnects with her roots there, and they send letters back and forth to each other. Number 56 is Green Glass House by Kate Milford. This is a middle grade book set at Green Glass House, which is this inn in a small town. We follow a young boy, Milo, and his parents like own the inn and they like live in the inn as well. And they're about to close down for the like winter holidays, but then a bunch of guests arrive kind of mysteriously during the middle of this winter storm. It's very wintry, very Christmassy, very, very cozy. Number 57 is Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. This is set in the 1970s. It's kind of like a family saga. It's this pastor's family. The family is rapidly unraveling. Each family member is going through some sort of change or revelation or crisis of some sort. Number 58 is Not That Bad, Dispatches from Rape Culture. This is an essay collection edited by Roxane Gay. These were all like personal essays about rape culture from very different perspectives and walks of life. Quite narrow subject, but a lot of like varied experiences. Number 59 is Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. In this book, we follow a character who had lived as a trans woman and has detransitioned to living as a man, is being asked by an ex-girlfriend who's also a trans woman to help raise a baby because her current girlfriend is now pregnant. They're trying to form this sort of very unconventional three-parent family in a way. You feel you really get to like know these characters very well, which is what I loved about the book. Number 60 is Sweep, The Story of a Girl and Her Monster by Jonathan Auxier. This is set in Victorian London. It's very heartwarming. It's about this young chimney sweep who gets stuck in a chimney and this bit of soot turns into a golem to protect her. And this is middle grade historical fiction. Number 61 is Bud Not Buddy by Christopher Paul Curtis. This is another middle grade historical fiction. It's set in the 1930s and we follow Bud, who's I think around 10 years old. He's living in this like foster home and he is leaving the foster home to try to track down who his father might be. He believes his father might be a musician, and Bud also loves music. So it's about like finding your family and finding your passion. Number 62 is the final revival of Opal and Ned by Donnie Walton. This is about a fictional music duo called Opal and Nev, and they shot up to fame very quickly in the 1970s. It's about their rise and fall, and they are planning this like big reunion concert. It's told through these interviews, these like transcripts, and also like bits of the reporters like notes and things. It felt very real, very much like a behind the music documentary. Number 63 is A World on the Wing, The Global Odyssey of Migratory Birds by Scott Weidensaul. This is a science/nature book about the migration of birds across the world. Number 64 is Unsettled Ground by Claire Fuller. This is about twins who are, I think, around 50 years old. Their mother dies, and they have been very sheltered their whole life and don't really know what to do. They're quite poor, uneducated, and socially isolated. Their mother didn't really let them become very self-sufficient. So when she dies, they're scrambling to try to figure out how to live. Number 65 is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. This is very much in the Gothic tradition. It's kind of like a sensation novel. This mysterious reclusive writer has summoned basically this lay biographer to write her life story, but she is notoriously deceptive, and you're never quite sure if what she's saying is truth or not. Number 66 is The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. This is historical fiction set in the 1800s in Ireland. We follow an English nurse who is sent there to investigate this girl who the family and the village is claiming hasn't eaten in like 3 or 4 months or something like that. And she's sent there to figure out, is this a legitimate miracle? It has great atmosphere, great setting, great pacing. Great characters. Like, it just has everything you would want in a book. Number 67 is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This is historical fiction set in the 1950s in Chinatown, in San Francisco. It's YA. It follows this teenage girl as she is figuring out her sexuality, and it's like set during the Red Scare, so there's a lot going on. She ends up going to this like queer nightclub called the Telegraph Club, And I just thought that the characterization of her and like her coming of age story was just really well done. Number 68 is Seven Fallen Feathers, Racism, Death, and the Hard Truths in a Northern City by Tanya Talaga. This is a nonfiction book about 7 Indigenous teenagers who died or went missing in Thunder Bay, Ontario, all in a very relatively short time frame. It's about systemic racism and colonialism and like why this is happening in this community. Number 69 is The Anomaly by Hervé Letellier. This is a science fiction book where this plane disappears and then reappears months later, and we follow a bunch of the different passengers on this plane. Number 70 is The Art of Losing by Alice Zeniter. This is a multi-generational story about a man, like the father, from Algeria. He's quite a wealthy man who becomes a refugee to France during the Algerian Revolution. Then it follows his son, who is a child when they become refugees, and it follows his life in Algeria and France. And then the granddaughter, who is raised in France, is very much a French woman and has like lost that connection to her Algerian heritage. So The Art of Losing refers to like the art of losing language and culture and like family history and what losing tradition like does to a family. Number 71 is The Subtweet by Vivek Shraya. This follows a Toronto-based musician who has one of her songs covered by this cover artist, and the cover version of the song blows up bigger than the original ever did, and they end up, the cover artist and the musician end up forming a friendship, and they become really close, but then everything starts to fall apart after something very hurtful is tweeted. Number 72 is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This follows a woman in present day, written in the 70s, and she's a Black American woman, and she keeps getting pulled into the past to slavery era America in order to save the life of this young boy. It's supremely dangerous for her to be there. It is very thrilling, very page turning, and you really get to know the characters as well. Number 73 is I Let You Go by Claire McIntosh. This is a thriller that I can't say much about. The opening is the death of a young boy who gets hit by a car, and then we follow Jenna, a grieving mother, as she's trying to like move on after the death of her son and tries to leave her entire life behind, but then there are things from her past that come back to catch up with her, like typical thriller. But I really liked the twists and turns in this book, and also I thought the setting was really well done. Number 74 is Lost Boy by Christina Henry. This is a dark fantasy. It is a Peter Pan story, reimagining Captain Hook as one of the Lost Boys, as the original Lost Boy, in fact. And we kind of see what happens to this relationship over time and how they end up where they end up. Number 75 is Between Two Kingdoms by Suleika Jouad. This is a memoir about being diagnosed with cancer at a very early age. She was in her early 20s, and how you navigate life when you've just graduated, you're trying to start your life. And it talks about like living between these two kingdoms, the kingdom of the ill and the kingdom of the well, because once you are well again, you never really are well again, and like how you are part of this very niche community of cancer survivors, and it is one of my favorite memoirs. Number 76 is Born a Crime, Stories from a South African Childhood by Trevor Noah. He's talking about different points of his life through childhood and his teenage years in South Africa, and being born a crime. His mother, a Black woman, had him with a white man, which was illegal at the time. There are harrowing parts, but it's also, of course, really funny. And I think, yeah, it was like a unique look into this particular time in South African history. Number 77 is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. In this book, it's science fiction. A man wakes up on a spaceship. He doesn't know why he's there. As his memories start to come back, you realize that he is on this mission to save the world. The science doesn't always make sense in this book, but it's just so much fun to read, and to see like how he's going to figure this out. And there are like heartstring tugging moments as well, which I wasn't expecting. So I ended up really loving this book. Number 78 is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. This is another one of these like paradigm shifting nonfiction books. He talks about like how in the West, like America, but in the West in general, how we handle like end of life, how we're kind of afraid of death here, and how we do everything to keep it at bay, but that is really oftentimes not in the best interest of the person who is dying. This is an absolutely must read for, I think, basically everybody. Number 79 is The Arrival by Sean Tan. This is a silent novel, so it's only illustrations, and it's the story of this refugee or immigrant. Elements of strangeness of being in this foreign land are depicted in this kind of like fantastical, surreal way, and I just loved the story. Number 80 is The Escape Artist, The Man Who Broke Out of Auschwitz to Warn the World by Jonathan Friedland. It's about a man who was one of only a couple of people who ever escaped from that concentration camp. He, of course, was trying to warn people about the horrors that were happening, and it was sadly an uphill battle from there. It talks about his life afterwards as well, and like later into his years. It reads very much like a thriller, but in a way that I think remains quite respectful to the subject matter. Number 81 is His Name is George Floyd, One Man's Life and the Struggle for Racial Justice by Robert Samuels. This weaves together the personal story of George Floyd with the larger discussions of systemic racism. This is one that I might reconsider the rating if I read it again, because it was brought to my attention like later that there were a lack of sources in this book, and the people who wrote this are journalists. So it's very compelling and very well written, but I think maybe not the best journalism. Number 82 is A Wish in the Dark by Christina Soontornvat. This is a middle grade fantasy based on Thai culture. It's set in a world with these magical glowing lights, and it just has such vivid imagery in this book. We follow a young boy who escapes from this prison where I believe he was born and raised there because his mother was a prisoner, and then also a girl who is trying to track him down. She's the daughter of like the prison warden, and it's how their stories collide. Number 83 is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This is a YA book where we follow this teenage boy who is trans, and he wants to be a brujo like all of his like brothers and uncles and father. He ends up trying to bring back someone from the dead, but brings back the wrong person, and then is stuck with this, the ghost of this teenage boy, kind of like the bad boy at school that has recently died, and he has to kind of help him like tie up loose ends before his spirit can be put to rest. Number 84 is Echo by Pam Munoz Ryan. This book has 3 separate stories linked together by this magic harmonica that finds its way from person to person. So in the first story, we're following a young boy who's living in, I think it's like Germany or Austria, right before the Second World War, just as it's starting. His father is very outspoken against Hitler, so they're in some danger. The second story follows a couple of brothers in foster care, and they are trying to stay together. And then the third story follows a girl in California whose older brother has just gone off to war. Number 85 is Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. This is another short story collection of speculative fiction. Number 86 is Greenwood by Michael Christie. This is a multi-generational story of the Greenwood family whose lives have always been tied to trees. So it follows like a forestry industrialist. It follows a carpenter, an environmental activist. The story goes backwards through like the different points of view, and then forwards, again, kind of like the rings of a tree. Number 87 is Why Fish Don't Exist by Lulu Miller. This is a mixture of science, biography, and memoir. It's about a scientist who contributed greatly to taxonomy and our understanding of life. And it's about the author as she is learning about his work and his unwavering determination to his studies. But it's also a kind of a cautionary tale about not putting people on pedestals and not idolizing others. Number 88 is An Immense World, How Animal Senses Reveal the Hidden Realms Around Us by Ed Yong. This is a science book all about the different senses of animals from senses they share with us, so how different animals like perceive vision, seen to ultraviolet, their touch, their smell, all of our senses, but it also talks about senses that we don't have, like detecting electromagnetic fields, for instance, and how we can never really truly understand how an animal perceives and experiences the world because we can only study their senses by way of our senses. It's a fascinating book. Number 89 is My Fourth Time We Drowned, Seeking Refuge on the World's Deadliest Migration Route by Sally Hayden. She is a journalist, and this is a book about refugees and people trying to cross the Mediterranean from northern Africa, which is a super deadly migration route. We follow the story of a few different people and like how they ended up where they ended up. Number 90 is Eating to Extinction, The World's Rarest Foods and Why We Need to Save Them by Dan Saladino. This is about agriculture and our food systems and how they're kind of broken. It is a very interesting but a very sobering read. Number 91 is Half American, The Epic Story of African Americans Fighting World War II at Home and Abroad by Matthew Delmont. This is about Black Americans during the Second World War and how they were treated worse in their own country and not respected for their sacrifices as soldiers. Good enough to fight, but not good enough to enjoy the benefits when they got back to home soil. Number 92 is 10 Steps to Nanette by Hannah Gatsby. In this book, she details her journey to understanding her own brain, her autism, how she views the world. It details some traumatic experiences she had and how all of her life history has informed her comedy, culminating, of course, in her groundbreaking special Nanette. Number 93 is Did You Hear Mammy Died by Seamus O'Reilly. This is a childhood memoir of the author growing up in Northern Ireland, losing his mother at a very young age, and being one of, I think, 10 or 11 siblings. It is a remembrance of his mother, but I think it's more so a love letter to his father. It deals with grief, but it's also very funny, and it doesn't really dwell in despair. Number 94 is Sure, I'll Join Your Cult, a memoir of mental illness and the quest to belong anywhere by Maria Bamford. This deals with some very difficult content: mental illness, bipolar, eating disorders, OCD. It's about Maria's penchant for joining 12-step programs and to belong anywhere she can. You have to already enjoy Maria's very odd sense of humor to enjoy this book, but she's one of my favorite comedians, so I loved it. Number 95 is Red Shirts by John Scalzi. This is a science fiction comedy book about the ensigns, so the lower ranks on a starship, who keep dying, and it follows characters, ensign characters, who are trying to figure out why these ensigns keep dying so that they can try to stay alive. Number 96 is The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. This is 2 essays. One is addressed to his nephew, and it's about Baldwin's life, growing up in the church. It also talks about him meeting Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad, who was the leader of the Nation of Islam at the time. It was written in the 60s, but sadly still very relevant. Number 97 is The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul by Douglas Adams. This is the second book in the Dirk Gently duology. It can stand alone on its own. It's a mystery novel, it's a comedy, it's a fantasy. There are Norse gods in it, and Dirk Gently is trying to solve what looks like an impossible murder. Number 98 is The Electric Stick by Salman Stolenhag. This is a narrative art book. The art in here is absolutely gorgeous, but the story is also very compelling. We're following a teenage girl as she is traveling across the western United States, or what used to be the United States, to try to get to the coast. We're not sure why. Of course, the story reveals itself as it goes along. I just fell in love with the art in this book, but also really appreciated the story and how it complemented the artwork. Number 99 is Wifedom, Mrs. Orwell's Invisible Life by Anna Funder. This is about Eileen, George Orwell's wife, and how she contributed to his life, to his work, to his writing, not only indirectly through supporting him, but also directly through editing and giving him ideas. She is quite neglected in George Orwell's biographies, so it was nice to see her recognized in this way. Number 100 is We Were Once a Family, A Story of Love, Death, and Child Removal in America by Roxana Asgharian. This is about the child welfare system in America, and it uses this one case study to kind of talk about that. It's about systemic racism, about bias against poverty, and about corruption in the judicial system. Number 101 is How to Say Babylon by Sophia Sinclair. This is a memoir of her childhood growing up in Jamaica in a very strict Rastafarian household, and it's about her family and how she found poetry and how poetry saved her life. Number 102 is Doppelganger, A Trip into the Mirror World by Naomi Klein. This is a book about mistaken identity and public perception and how we present ourselves. It's about social media, it's about the alt-right, it's about a lot of things, and it somehow doesn't get too messy. Number 103 is All Quiet on the Western Front by Eric Maria Remarque. This was a reread for me. This is a First World War novel following a troop of German soldiers on the Western Front. Number 104, the last book on the list, is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. This is about Henrietta Lacks's cells, which continue to grow and divide even to this day, making possible so many medical advancements. It's about how this impacted the family when they found out about her cells. And while it does discuss the medical side of things, it really focuses on the Lacks family. Those were the 104 books I have rated 5 stars over the last 5 years of having this channel. Let me know if you read any of them, what you thought of them. Wish me a happy Booktube birthday in the comments below. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and we will chat soon. Take care.